10 Questions With, the show that asks the questions you want to ask, never thought to ask, but always, always, always gets answers. So Barry, first question right out of the box. Who was your idol growing up?
Well, I had a few of them. My first one, I would think, started out with Gordie Howe at an earlier age because that was my mother's favorite hockey player. And then that sort of went into Bobby Hull. And then, of course, it went into Bobby Orr when I switched in minor hockey to becoming a defenseman. I wanted to play like him. And in Vancouver, the Boston Bruins came through, I think, in 1970. And I would miss school and go down to the practices. And when they came into town, I would get, I would get one of Espo sticks and I would get one of Bobby Orr sticks. So I had those at home, and he's, I guess, arguably you can say the best player that ever lived. I think he was. Well, Gretz is right there also, and Mario, and there's a few others that are there also. But yeah, my other one was John Ferguson, who played for the Montreal Canadiens, because he grew up in Vancouver and he was, I think, one of the first to really play in the big six teams, original six. And we went to the same high school, and he was tough. He was a tough right winger, and he helped the Canadiens win a lot of cups. And my other idol, because I played football, was Dick Butkus. So I tried to sort of form myself as a hockey player in those images of Bobby Orr, of John Ferguson, and Dick Butkus. So if you put those into one hockey player, then that's what I tried to be.
Right, that's great. I mean, that is really, if you never really thought of that, but that is who you were. It's awesome. All right. Favorite and least favorite arena to play in?
I think, okay, you have to understand all the arenas have different sight lines. And I have a lot of musician friends. And when they go into a building, they'll check out the acoustics, and some lines just feel better and you feel more comfortable. And that is the same with hockey rinks. I used to love, probably not too many people or players would say the same rinks, but I used to love the Igloo in Pittsburgh. And I used to love the Checkerdome in St. Louis. And then, of course, the fabulous Forum in LA. And really, it was because of the way the boards and the glass had a lot of give to it. So you could skate from one end of the rink to the other and crash into those boards and you wouldn't get hurt. The Canadian rinks, the glass was very solid and not a lot of give especially in Toronto. Same in Edmonton, and Vancouver was also the same. So those three rinks were sort of about of the same mold. So when you took a guy into the boards or you wanted to look for somebody to throw a big body check, you were going to feel it afterwards too. So you sort of played a little bit of a different game in those arenas. But LA is always interesting because that was the only warm place on any of our road trips. So it was like everybody looked like Miami Vice when we got to the airport and we were going on the trip. Everybody had white pants, flowered shirts, sunglasses. So that was sort of our time to go out there and relax, because the circus was always playing at the Garden when we left in February to go on our 2-week trip of the year.
Game day superstition or ritual that you did for every game?
Well, I would usually try to follow my own regiment of what I did night before, always try to stay in. I mean, if I did go out the night before a game, it was always to have just sort of a quiet dinner, and then usually home by at least 10 o'clock. And that way I'm in bed by 11:30 and thinking about the game. 2-3 nights before the game, that could be different living in New York City. I mean, you could be out and partying with friends and having a good time, and but I think for me, there was a lot of pressure when I first went to the Rangers, and I was just still a young man, and I didn't really like going into New York City when I played for Colorado. I mean, I was wearing a cowboy hat. I was just buying a house in Colorado. The Rangers were actually in Colorado when the trade was made. And so I just switched dressing rooms to play the following game, which Colorado happened to win. I think it was 6-2 or something. And I think everybody who I was traded for scored a goal in that game. So I think we had one more game on the trip that was in Vancouver, which we won, and then came home. And then I had my first game at the Garden, which was really one of the highlights of playing in the NHL, was playing my first game at Madison Square Garden and finally feeling that excitement that I didn't feel at other rinks that I played at.
Player you least wanted to match up against?
Well, that depends what you're talking about. If it's one that was tough to defend against, I mean, I got a chance to defend against some great right wingers in Mike Bossy and Curry and Rick Middleton, and I mean, so I had the opportunity to play against the best. So, it's a good question to ask me because I know how good Boss was. I mean, we had Pierre LaRouche that came to us and played for us. And those two players are two of the players that could find the net at any way. I mean, they could be facing the other end of the rink and still shoot at the net and know where the net was. So they were always a challenge for me, and I always looked forward to it. I mean, tough players, Clark Gillies, and obviously the Islanders with Bobby Nystrom also were two guys that were very competitive in front of the net. And I really liked that. But the part of the game that I loved the most was physical, fast, and really competitive hockey. That's my favorite type of hockey to play.
Best teammate you ever played with?
Best teammate? Well, I had quite a few of them. I knew Ron Greshner from an early age because we both played for Ernie McLean in the Newestminster Bruins in Western Canada Hockey League. So we came out of that system of Ernie getting everything out of every player that he had, getting the most. And I had watched Gresh played many times in Queen's Park Arena, so I was always a fan of his. And so I would have to say he'd be one of them. Tommy Laidlaw also. And, I'd have to mention Mark Pavlich also as one who was very quiet. And a lot of people on the team really never got to know Mark, but that was his personality. And man, I had a lot of respect for him. What a great player he was, a creative player. I know Ron Duguay will tell you the same thing because he scored a lot of goals playing on his wing. Unfortunately, Pav was the one who usually went into the corners and played inside the perimeter. And when you do that, you take a lot of punishment. Physical punishment, and he wasn't a big guy, but he had a lot of respect from all the players. But there's a long list of guys that I could go through on being great teammates, and so I'm sure I'm not throwing out a lot of names that I could, but in the early years when I first got there, 80, 81, we had a pretty big, tough team, and then that slowly changed when Herb came and just started to go with more pace and puck possession. And and all 5 players attacking. So that's when I really started to come in to be the player that I needed to be. Unfortunately, I got hurt, or I could have thought I could have had a lot of years with the Rangers where I could have done a lot. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I still have a lot of great memories.
Most interesting conversation you had with a referee, linesman, or on-ice official during a game?
Well, that can go both ways. So sometimes, I always treated the linesmen and respected, firstly, my early years. After watching them growing up on TV, a lot of them were still getting to the end of their careers. So they had been there quite a while. Yeah, there's one story that I don't think I can tell right now.
You can change the name.
I think
change the name.
Well, I think it was with Andy Van Helleman, and there was just some language used at the end where I asked him a question about if if a referee could give a player a penalty for what I was thinking, and he said, no, I can't really do that. So, okay. So I told him, well, I think you're an F&A. And he said, that's a 10-minute misconduct. So, little things like this. There's always something, usually, that, of course, me being captain would always say, I'd come up to the refs and sort of say, have a good game and have a safe game. And so I always enjoyed that part of being a captain in that leadership role of being able to communicate to the referees on what was happening, and because they're a big part of the game.
Most annoying trash talker that you played against in your career?
Well, there wasn't too many trash talkers. There were some chirpers more. There was, and it's usually the smaller guys. So, but all players that I respected, because you would have wanted them on your team. So there wasn't really like a Sean Avery guy back in the 80s, but Dino Cicerelli, who played for Minnesota, and I think he went on to play for Detroit also. I mean, he was always hanging around in front of the net. And you could cross-check him and do anything you wanted to him, but he was always there. And then, of course, when you would go back up ice, when the puck would leave the zone, he would give you a little hack in the back of the ankles, a la Doug Gilmour, a la Bobby Clark. Those kind of guys, they were competitive guys. And, me being a bigger, sort of stronger player, that was their little jab to get back at me, since they weren't going to throw any big body checks at me, but they were going to use their stick to their advantage. So I'd say those 3.
Favorite NHL jersey of all time?
Well, I used to like Chicago. I think a lot of players will say that, with the original 6 teams. But then again, when I went to the Rangers, that uniform became my favorite uniform. And every game I put it on, I was proud to put it on. And of course, I still feel part of the Rangers, and I always will be, as I think all of the other captains have ever captained the team, and most of the players who played. You don't have to be captain to feel the same way. Once you put on that jersey, it's a different feeling, because you've got a lot involved. You got playing at the Garden, first of all, the greatest sports venue in the world. And then you have the people, and the people of the Tri-City area, and getting to know them when you get out into the community and finally start to see who New Yorkers are. Then you get more of a feeling for what you need to do on the ice. So I know the Rangers do a lot of community work, and that's great. And so if you're a new player coming to the team, I'm sure now the new players will certainly make you feel at home and show you the ropes. When I first came, I sort of had to learn them by myself. So, yeah, New York Ranger uniform, number one.
If you could go back in time and be a defensive partner of any other defenseman that ever played in the game, who would it be and why?
Well, besides the Ranger defensemen that I played with, I certainly have to mention them first, or I'm going to get a lot of emails here tomorrow on you know what. So they're probably still mesmerized. I was able to figure out the Zoom code to even get on this call here today. But I played in the Challenge Cup as a rookie in I think it was 78, and played against the Russians where it was 3 out of 5, I think. And a short series where we won the first game, then won the second game, and then they sort of blew us out 6-0 in the third game. And I got to play with Serge Savard, who was, one of the best defensemen ever to play the game. And Larry Robinson, Dennis Potvin was on that team. For me, I would have to say, besides Reijo Ruotsalainen and the other members of the teams that I played on, because Reijo was a different player. I mean, Reijo was somebody who could skate as fast backwards as he could forwards. So, but the red line was still in play at that time. So I would just tell him, Reijo, you just go. Anytime you get a chance and you see open ice, you go. I got the puck. I'll find you. I'll put it into an area where you can get it, or I'm going to hit you on the fly. So that's basically what I told him. And so I became more of a defensive role. With playing with Reijo. With some other players on our team, I could be more of an offensive role. But I think Larry Robinson is one guy that I would have loved to play on a consistent basis with. So that would probably be a highlight for me. And I did get a chance to play with him, and he's a funny guy. So I like funny guys.
A last question. Best hockey movie of all time?
Well, I would say Slapshot. I mean, it's a cult film, and when that first came out, my brother was playing in the East Coast Hockey League for Roanoke, Virginia, and he'd tell me all these stories. And of course, during the mid '70s, when I was playing in New Westminster, our style was like the Flyers were playing and winning their cups in, I think it was 74 and 75. And it wasn't until Montreal came along, and it was sort of, when they played, it was that intimidating style against a team that wasn't going to back down from that style and also show their skill off. And I think Montreal swept them. I don't know if it was in 70, 78 or 77, somewhere in there. So the game changed after that. It started to no longer become, you couldn't intimidate players. You couldn't tell them when you lined up at the face-off circle that if you touch the puck today or tonight, that I'm going to spear you in the head, so don't come down my side, and things like this. I mean, now players would laugh at you if they said that. I'm making $10 million a year, buddy, or $10 million a year, buddy. But I don't equate to what you're saying. So was a different game, especially in the 70s when I first started. And then when Herb came, now I really think Herb changed the game completely. And we had some great series with the Islanders in the early 80s. We just weren't quite good enough. And then when you look at their team and how many Hall of Famers you have, you would have to look at our team and say, Well, how many Hall of Famers did we have through that process? And there wasn't any. So if you're going to have teams that make good runs and go to the cup, then you're going to have 7, 8 players on your team that are going to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So, and when the Rangers did finally win, you can see the Hall of Fame players that they have and the players that contributed to that win. Have great memories of playing in New York. So still have a lot of good memories. But do I only get 10 questions?
You want more? I'll give you more. Definitely want more. So, all right, I'll give you one. Favorite coach to play for?
Yeah, that was Herb Brooks. It was just because it was just, you know, he has that reputation of really being a disciplinarian. And, you know, when Fred Shiro was coach, we had 45-minute practices. Well, when Herb came in and even after those 45-minute practices with Fred, some players would complain about, well, what are we doing on the ice so long? So then Herb came along and, you know, I know his first season, he sent out a workout book for the summer. And I mean, it was like an encyclopedia to follow. And then, of course, on the last page was a picture of the Stanley Cup. And so I thought he was just a great coach on how to implement everybody involved into the play and having puck possession. So I think people got to see our style of play then, which was just so fun to play as a player. Because as a player, you want to be involved in both offense and defense. If you're a defenseman, you just don't want to stand around the net. I mean, that was in the 60s. So this was in the early 80s. They had already won the gold medal in 1980 at Lake Placid by playing that style and playing up-tempo kind of puck possession style. So don't throw the puck in. You could come back and regroup and start again. Didn't matter if you had to do it 3 or 4 times. We'd practice it and practice. And like his practices were 3 hours. And so we weren't quite used to that. We were used to going to the rink when Fred was coach and going in and, you know, the guys that lived in the city, the 5 of us, I mean, we would be out of there by 12 o'clock. Whereas now, with the practice facility they have, and this was at Rye, New York in the 80s. So, I mean, one of the biggest things that happened to us there was when they brought in the 8-man hot tub. That was one of the biggest things. And I went through the facility in Terrytown at their practice facility, and I'm going, well, I'd never want to leave here. You know, I'd come to practice. I'd want to stay. I mean, I'd want to stay all day because they got everything, you know, pool table, theaters, their own chef and restaurant. And who'd want to leave that? I mean, so I think those are some of the changes that we went through. And yeah, but Herb really taught me a lot about the game, really about the X's and O's and the technical side more of the game. And it became a great game, fun game to play after that.
Player from your day that you played against or with that is not in the Hall of Fame, but should be?
I do know that I think Ron Gressner's Ranger number 4 jersey should be retired at Madison Square Garden. I think it was 16 seasons that he played for one team. I think that should be enough for a player to get his jersey hung up on the rafters there. And because of the lack of the overall team success and not winning a cup while we were there, I'd be hard pressed to say that anybody would have had the qualifications to make it into the Hall of Fame, because you got to win. And that's the main thing.